too small, I got big dreams.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Pun Fun, where we have fun with the puns. My name is Ryan, and we're here with Mike Rooth, and exactly that rhymes with tooth. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How you doing, man?
I am doing awesome. Welcome to the show, by the way.
Thank you.
Super happy to have you on. So Mike has done covers for DC, Image, IDW, Aftershock, Boom. I mean, any publisher, you name it, he's probably had an influence or has done a cover for them, for sure. And amongst all those, he actually has his own comic as well, with Matt Nixon, which is called Dodge. So we'll get into that a bit further on because that's usually in the Kickstarter. So speaking about, your background and all that, can you give us a bit of your background?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. I'm in my mid 40s. I was born in the mid 70s. I always had an interest in art. I think my mother used to draw when I was very young. So my earliest memories are kind of watching her draw, and I somehow got my hands on comic books early in my life. I don't know if I stole them from my neighbor or my uncle, but she would very often, copy some of the characters right off of the page for me, and she was really good at it. And so I was just kind of fascinated with art from that standpoint. And I think when I got to about the age of 6 or 7, well, my little brother was born when I was 7, and I think at that point she kind of had to shift focus. So I was. I don't have the motor skills at 7, but I'm getting there. And so she was like, "Oh, I don't have time to help you draw, but maybe you can try it yourself, And so I kind of just got into it that way. And then kind of from there on, I was always just sort of the art kid.
No, absolutely. And you said you've read comics, and obviously, you as doing your own. What would you say back then were your influences, or like what were you into that not motivated you, but you definitely influenced your style?
Oh man, well, I mean. As I got older, I started to appreciate a lot more art history, and then I also just started looking into some of the the guys that I really like Frank Frazetta. But then I started to look into his contemporaries, and people that studied with him, and people that were students of his, like Joe Jusko or Ken Kelly, guys like that. So I really loved that kind of high fantasy, painted, the cover of Dungeons and Dragons books and things like that. That's what I always wanted to do. Even from a very young age. Getting educated in illustration was great because it was really about that, creating an image that could tell a whole story, book covers, that kind of thing. The funny thing was, when I was at school, I was kind of told that my work wouldn't really cut it in comics, and that I should probably avoid that path, because at the time, to be fair, to their credit, they were probably sparing me what they thought was going to be a disastrous career choice, because at the time, comics were kind of in a bad spot. It was the Image thing had kind of been a flash in the pan, and it was now 1996, 97.
Right. And Marvel and DC was bankruptcies.
Marvel was on its belly, what I mean? And, they ended up selling it, Spider-Man to Sony, and that's where we got the films, and that's before that big tidal wave came. Yeah. So I kind of finished my illustration program without a portfolio that felt like me. It was kind of like a little bit of children illustration, a little bit of advertising, a little bit of, celebrity portraits, a little bit of technical drawing. So I didn't really leave school with a solid look or a solid style. And I really wanted to do comics, but I was advised by professionals not to. So, I kind of avoided that path for about 10 years, and just ended up doing. The nice thing about graduating school with a very diverse portfolio was I could get a job drawing for anybody, pretty much.
True. Very true.
Big magazines. I could work for a Hustler magazine. I could work for a news outlet. I could work for whatever. Instruction booklets, things like this. Just about any kind of place where drawings were necessary. I did it. I never said no to a job for the first probably 15 years of my career, because. You never know how quickly you can be replaced when you're just doing it all on your own.
Right.
And eventually I got hired full-time by a company here in Oakville called Rubicon. They gave me full-time work doing drawing children's books, basically from home. And I drew something like 40 graphic novels in a 5-year span. I drew a graphic novel every 6 weeks for 7 years.
Wow,
it was a grind.
Beast mode. That's crazy.
But you know, by the end of that, I figured out that I could draw comics and that I actually wasn't that bad at it. And when that job ended, I decided to say screw it. And at that point, I was 35 years old. I had some health issues, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna chase after this thing that's been dogging me my whole life. Who cares what the teacher said? Who cares what reality says?
Wow.
You know, this massive pop culture tidal wave came down in the late 90s, early 2000s with the X-Men films, the Spider-Man films, the reboots of this, the Star Wars stuff, all of it.
Absolutely.
And so there I was standing there in this deluge of flood with a portfolio that was basically useless to try to find that kind of work. So I spent 10 years basically floundering in a state of poverty, but working all the time. It's just scrounging it all together, working for a record label over here, designing a tattoo for this guy over here, a logo for that, you know, tile company, whatever. Like it was just whatever, you know. So,
yeah, whatever came was. Yep, but I mean, kudos to you. I mean, it definitely paid off. I mean, look at you now. I mean, you know, highlighting shows and you know, you're definitely a big name within the comic book industry too. So, I mean, definitely perseverance and hard work definitely paid off. Again, kudos to you for you know, not putting your hands down and yeah, very well done.
It's never a straight line to get to wherever you think you're going. You know, a lot of people still ask me, how do I break into comics, Mike? And I always say, if I knew, I would tell you. If you find out, though, tell me, because I kind of feel like I'm still breaking into it in a lot of ways. And, you know, getting cover work is fantastic. It's really what I love to do versus sequential work. But, you know, it's hard to get that kind of job. It's hard to get cover gigs just off the break street in like that. So, but now, thankfully, I've been doing that. Mainly, I've been doing cover work for the last 5 years or so. So I've got a huge body of work now doing covers. So I've never missed a deadline, and everyone's knows they can rely on my stuff. So I'm still eluded by Marvel. I did work for Marvel very briefly in the early 2000s, but I'm still missing that last gold.
That last stone.
That last stone in the gauntlet, so to speak.
Yeah.
One day.
Exactly. The day's still young. I mean, if you've acquired all the rest of them, it's just a matter of time, honestly.
You know, after Swamp Thing happened, I was kind of like, okay, well, if that could happen, then really anything could happen.
Absolutely.
And you know, and Swamp Thing happened by the result of just, you know, having built good relationships in this industry for a long time. And, you know, everyone always says, oh, Mike draws Swamp Thing all the time. That's how we got that job at DC. It's not. I'm sure DC, I don't even know if DC ever saw any of my Swamp Things before I even got the job there. But I know that the company that I did the variant for, Big Country Comics, they were pushing, trying to get me a DC comic. They believe in me, and they had that kind of faith in me. So having that kind of an ally in this business is huge. And that's where so many of the opportunities that I've had in the past 2 years, during COVID especially, you know, getting published at the Turtles and, you know, doing Last Ronin stuff and all these lucky things I've had. I feel very lucky. I'm like the luckiest guy I know in so many ways. And yeah, it's just it pays to make friends in the business and to maintain good relationships, you know, and to always be professional and, you know.
Absolutely.
Black guys you get every so often, you know, on and go back into the fight, you know. So.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Last Ronin, your covers are just spectacular. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm also a fan of your work there, but regardless, I mean, I think it's one of the comics that is, any local comic book store I've been to, it's the ones to be sold out, like off the shelf right away. So you know you're doing something right, and you know that the fans are loving it too. And even people that may have not even known who you were, just by glancing over it right away, you know, it's a sure favorite right away. So well done. And I guess the team down in Eastman know what they're doing to pick up, you know, such talent as well. So very well done.
Oh, I mean, I appreciate that. Again, I'm lucky to have working with guys like Big Country Comics and Yellow Snow Comics, who gave me the opportunities to work, you know, but being able to, like, to rub, not so much rub shoulders, but just to know that I'm a part of this bigger machine that's making this awesome thing. And having been a Turtles fan since I was 10 years old in 1985,
wow.
You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, holy moly, like, to be on this, to be a fan my whole life. And then, of course, my little brother, he got into the Turtles right when Turtle Mania started, when the cartoon was brand new.
I was part of that.
I was a teacher by then, so it was kind of like, you know what I mean? It was kind of this weird, I got to enjoy it all again at a slightly different a slightly different version, but
yeah,
the
absolutely.
Turtles that I grew up with were the black and white, ultra violent comics, right? But
yeah, which are also, I guess even today that there's always been different iterations of the Turtles, and I guess regardless which ones we've had, either the ones in the 2000s, the one in the 80s, even the recent 2012. Well, I mean, there's one right now, Rise of the Turtles, but 2012, I was not skeptic, but I was like, oh, it's that 3D model. I was kind of like, okay, do I want to see it? It was amazing. It really stayed true to the story. It showcased so much. Anyways, it definitely had a love for it. Yeah.
That's the truly phenomenal thing about the whole TMNT franchise. I mean, those guys had no idea they were creating something so special.
Oh, yeah.
And when you really think about it, like, there's never been anything quite as successful as Turtles in terms of its, other than obviously Marvel, obviously Spider-Man,
right?
Other than Batman, Superman. But I mean, for an independent comic to go and have the reach that it's had and had the multiple iterations it's had. I mean, other countries
impact,
have reinterpreted them in different ways too. And I mean, there's this worldwide buzz around the Turtles that every generation gets their own version of the Turtles. Like I have a nephew that loved the version from I guess it was the CGI kind of like the
reboot type.
But he used it like that's his Turtles. You know what I mean? So it's marvelous. It's a marvelous thing. And to be attached to it in any way is just a huge honor. It always feels like a huge honor.
Awesome. And so talking about your comics that you've been on, and I'm guessing obviously your art process had to have evolved as well. So do you mind if we get into more of your art process in terms of, for example, this Batman I have behind me, or even your Jenica cover 1 where you have her in the background with all the bandanas? Like, those are they're striking, they resonate. But what I like about your covers is that there's always an evoke emotion. It's not just like, oh, it's a beautiful piece. There's always a emotional adventure that goes along with it. So how do you get something like this started?
So that was a piece where the theme of the project was Joker, and every artist in the project had a different approach, and they could do it however they wanted to do it. Wow. And for me, the Joker has had it's like whenever you draw one of those classic characters, the challenge is, how do I do it differently but still keep it the same? How do I make it clear that it's the Joker but do it in an original way? And that's always huge. And that's why guys like Superman and Spider-Man in a way are very difficult to draw, because Spider-Man not so much because of the mask, but you got a guy like Superman, if you don't get that look right, that spirit right, it's just a guy in a blue suit and a cape. With
a curl. Yeah.
Right. And there's something in the look, there's a hope in Superman that doesn't exist with other characters like that. So that's a hard thing to capture. So someone like the Joker, for me, the Joker exists in Batman's head more real, more than he does in the physical world. And so
rent
I
free.
want to get that idea of, like, it's all contained within the cowl of Batman's head. This endless nightmare of the Joker that, so many times he defeats the Joker, but the Joker always comes back. There's never a definitive ending.
Yeah, true. Nemesis to the end, yeah.
So they make it in the movies, and it's always a definitive ending. But it's because I'm an art robot. I love to be told what to draw. A lot of artists don't like that, but that's been my whole career. Has basically been hitting deadlines based on instructions from higher ups. You're an illustrator. You're not really an artist. You're an artist, but the divide between illustrator and artist is a real thing. The artist makes things for himself. The illustrator makes art for other people.
Right.
And so, it's that whole relationship that, sometimes the artist has to take off his hat and the illustrator has to put on his and just get the work done on time,
Wow.
But it's like doing a cover. I always want to do my best work. I want to have a little bit of fun with it if I can. I want to impress the creator for sure.
Absolutely.
In my mind, that's where relationships begin to get built and where future opportunities are born. It's all about building a relationship. This is a very fragile business that we're in, and it's very important to always just to be cool with everyone.
Just make sure everyone's having a good time and respect all around. Yeah, absolutely.
One thing, and if things aren't working out with you and another creator, you don't see eye to eye, then you don't have to look in the same direction anymore. You don't have to. There's divides, and but it's a wonderful place to be. There's room for everybody. But it's a tricky place to work sometimes with the comic biz. It's got its ups and downs for sure.
You said so. This was off camera. That you were open to show us kind of your process in motion. So you want to go ahead and sketch something, and by all means, if, you can go ahead and do that, and we'll keep going with our our interview as well. I think and this would be an awesome time also to bring up, as you mentioned, Dodge as well.
Yeah, I can show you some stuff on that camera. Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. So I'll let you set up, and with the magic of I guess YouTube.
Give me a sec here, and I'll switch right over. Here we go. You see me okay?
Yeah, we are perfect. Oh, that's a great view.
Great. Awesome. All right. So let me just adjust something here. So, in terms of a demo, one of the things that I've been doing the past couple of years that people really seem to dig are these found object drawings that I've been doing, where I will do an ink drawing based just on some random object that I found outside.
I love these. I've been following for quite some time, and when I saw these, okay, so for example, these are just examples of stuff he's used before. So he's used the bread clip, so that little tie plastic thing you get to make a xenomorph. He's also made Swamp Thing with it. He's used a turkey bone, an action figure accessory, and I think one of my the one that really got to me was the COVID test. So it's already been used. It was negative. And I was like, wait, what? And then he really utilized it and made art, and I'll put up exactly what he made with it. You would never believe what could come out of these objects in the right hands, of course. But
I appreciate that, man. I did a book a couple of years ago, actually, of just found object drawings, and so I don't have very many left. But I'm actually going to get another. I'm hoping in time for the Toronto Fan Expo, I'm going to have another batch of maybe 50 of these printed up. Wow. But these were all done with different found objects, and this was that was a bread tie Batman that I had done. Bread tie. You mentioned the xenomorph. I had done a xenomorph with a broken van tail light, a headlight, basically. Stuff like that. So it's just a matter of dipping it in the ink and doing some cool stuff with it. So I was thinking I would do that because that'll show up well on camera. And then
absolutely.
I got some stuff around here that I could draw with. I'll see what I can find. I go to the beach a lot with my wife, and sometimes we find cool stuff on the beach to draw with. I don't know how well I'll be able to draw with this, but this is a
tooth?
It is actually a piece of a fish spine.
Okay.
A gigantic piece of fish spine that I found on a beach.
That's quite the fish, though. Wow.
It must have been one heck of a fish. Yeah.
Yeah.
My hand here. I don't know how well it's going to draw, though. That's the thing. Sometimes you think, this eagle claw will be great to draw with, but then you actually, in practice, it's actually useless to draw with. The ink won't flow or whatever.
Or it might be too flexible, or it flicks maybe too much too, and I guess you have to roll with the punches, I guess.
And that's part of the excitement of it as well. Is that I don't know what the results are going to be like, and that, for me, that kind of makes art exciting again, because when you've been doing something like this as long as I have, you get to a point where you got to kind of try to, keep yourself interested, because a lot of the time it's just rendering and stuff like this. So
right.
A lot of the time it's just work. So when you want to make art, you want to make something new and exciting that inspires. Sometimes it's best if you yourself don't know where that's coming from. And so for me, this is what I do these found object drawings for. So I just want to see what kind of a line I can get. And yeah, I'm not getting much of a line out of this thing here. This is this is on my desk for a while. It may be one that I tried before and abandoned.
Okay.
So you know what? That's cool. We'll try something else. I have this actually. Yeah, you mentioned the action figure accessory. This is
is that part of Godzilla's tail?
It's
or?
part of my Swamp Thing action figure.
Oh.
You can take off one of his hands and replace it.
And it becomes like a spike. That's awesome.
Yeah. So you know what? It's actually a pretty interesting piece of plastic, though. It's got all kinds of edges and weird lines on it.
And
so
even I guess more pinpoint edges.
Yeah.
I see there's 2 points. Yeah.
So let's see. I can draw like a Swamp Thing or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, fire away with any questions you might have, man, and I'll just.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you had mentioned Dodge, and we want to actually talk about it as well. So, Dodge is a comic book that you and Matt Nixon came together and collaborated on.
Yes.
And it was 3 successful Kickstarters. So, there's 3 issues that are out. So, my question to you is, where did you guys come up with that idea? The concept of your character, but also the setting, right? So it's a U.S. super soldier, but it's hunting like Soviet werewolves. So I was like, okay. I kind of got the Wolfenstein versus the kind of Doom mishmash into all that, and I was like, I loved playing those games growing up. So where do you guys get inspiration to pump something like that out?
Well, so Dodge is actually the, maybe just quickly I'll show on this here. This is issue 1 and issue 2 of Dodge. Issue 3 is at the printers right now, or will be very shortly, and the Kickstarter was back in May, and was really successful. Our best one yet, actually. So we're gonna have issue 3 out hopefully I'm hoping by the end of August, but it's really hard to say.
Right.
And yeah, Dodge was a character. All these characters actually, Dodge, Colonel Swan, and Arnold Begay are 3 characters from Matt Nixon's book Retcon, which is a graphic novel he did at Image Comics in 2017. I'm just gonna grab a copy of it. Here. So I've got the trade paperback version of it. So yeah, it's basically like without oversimplifying it, it's kind of like G.I. Joe meets Hellboy. You have these soldiers who have special abilities, and they're hired specifically to do, to battle threats that are of a supernatural nature.
Okay.
So in Retcon, you first meet Dodge, and he's at like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, kind of spilling his guts to like the counselor, and he mentions, he mentions the Gulf War and the Saddam Hussein whole situation, and he was, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and that's what we went there looking for. But the reality was, the weapons of mass destruction were actually a genie. It wasn't a nuke or a dirty bomb. It was a genie. Right. It was a living genie. So if you can imagine an evil despot with the power of a genie, at his command. So so Dodge and his team were hired to take this guy down. So it's pretty cool. In the story of Dodge, it takes place over the course. There's flashback scenes that take place in Vietnam when Dodge is like 19 years old. And they're on a special mission, and there's a whole werewolf serum thing that the Russians are working with the Viet Cong, and this whole thing. It's a pretty cool story. And that kind of wraps up in issue 2, but then issue 2 kind of jumps right to a new story with, that leads into number 3. So pretty exciting stuff. We're going to some pretty exciting places with Dodge. Dodge, Chris the Animal Dodge, the character, is basically a badass commando, but he's also a werebear. And so he can transform into a bear, and just immensely powerful character. Lieutenant Swan, or Colonel Swan, he's a bionic soldier, so he's kind of like a $6 million man type archetype.
Wow.
And then you have Arnold Begay, who is he is a Navajo. He's called Res Dog, is his kind of nickname. And he's kind of like a super marksman, but he also has a telekinetic abilities, like he can levitate, and he can kind of fly and stuff like that. So they got special abilities. There's other guys on the team too that you'll meet that I don't want to spoil just yet, but there's sort of like different archetypes that you'll recognize from superheroes. But Matt's done some really interesting stuff with the character creation on them. So Dodge was one where I was able to breathe life into characters that already kind of existed in the Retcon story, but I was able to kind of flesh them out a little bit more and add some more body and history to them. So yeah.
Very cool. And you spoke of 1, 2, and 3. Is there any talk of the 4th issue in the works?
Yes, it's always been planned to be a 4th issue. That's always been in the works. It's been a slow process. Like, we started this back in 2018, and it was a really odd time for me. I was going through some pretty major job transition stuff, and I took on the job, and then there was just some pretty big tragic stuff that was happening, and it really delayed the project. I got the first issue done, and then it took me a year to get the second issue done. And then it took about another 9 months or so to get the third issue finished, like my end finished. But COVID really slowed things down and messed things up for us too. But also COVID kind of streamlined things for us, and when we ran our first Kickstarter, it was like 2 months after COVID started.
Wow.
And Matt was kind of like, this is either the best time to do a Kickstarter or the worst time. And, we ended up having a successful Kickstarter. It ended up being, we started to notice that that entertainment value was moving online when people couldn't go to conventions anymore. There was big changes that were happening. And so why not print a comic book that, we won't be able to tour it, but at least we'll be able to make it. And if, no one thought COVID was going to last 3 years, right?
No, exactly. Everyone thought it was going to be 14 days, and that was it.
Man, I thought it was going to be like a 20-day lockdown and everyone's going to be good,
Oh,
but
were we ever wrong?
Yeah. It's been no fun, that's for sure. But you know what? It's been a weird time for me. Like I'll be honest, right before, not to get, sidetracked, but like right before the pandemic broke out, like I was in a state of pretty near poverty. Like I was in a really rough spot where I was looking down the barrel of homelessness, to be honest with you.
Wow.
And a weird thing happened during COVID where things just kind of streamlined and life got really simple because there was so little to do outside of just focus on my work, focus on getting my projects done, and focus on staying healthy and safe. And so a year went by, and all of a sudden I noticed my bills were getting paid on time, and I was kind of getting ahead of the game in a few things. And I was like, so it took the end of the world for me to finally figure out what I was doing, But yeah, it's been a really weird time, man. But it's been an amazing time, I think, creatively. I think some of the art that we're seeing and some of the projects and music and everything we're seeing coming out of this pandemic period is going to be really interesting, and it's going to be maybe an artistic period of its own,
absolutely.
Historically, one day, there's some interesting things happening for sure, because people have had to completely pivot and change how they do things.
Absolutely, and that's actually a good point you brought up. Going back to like the last two conventions, conventions now started back. There were actually a lot of new artists in the sense that like they, their story is exactly that. During the pandemic, they had time to, pursue other passions that they've always had, but they never had the time to really, venture into. And then they realized like, hey, you know what? They do have a knack for it, and they'll post it up, via the internet, making it easy.
Yeah,
having a certain audience, I guess, to get you, going and create that fandom. And yeah, some people are now they've switched their entire career path into something creative because they were able to explore more, practice, or whatever it was during that time of isolation, or just time of that break, if you will.
Well, and some people's jobs just simply never came back, right? Like some people have. Sure. I can't speak for myself. Like my job, if anything, just got more. Like I got busier. I don't know how, because there was a time when it was like they weren't even printing comics for a while. Like everything just stopped. And I thought, well, this is it. I got to find something else now. But I started doing online sketching. I started doing online auctions, and just trying to kind of pay the bills with like little daily small sales of sketches and things like that. And you know what? It kind of came together in a surprising way. And I'm really grateful to everyone who supported any artist during the pandemic. It's been a difficult thing to do when you're, with everyone, everyone's got a little bit less to work with these days, right? So it's,
gotta make what you got. Absolutely. Out of all of this, out of the whole, comic book industry, what would you say was your favorite moment?
Man, that's really hard to say, especially when you consider the different things that happen at Comic Cons that only happen at Comic Cons.
Right.
Like I've had moments where I had to slap myself to
wow, because
I couldn't believe it was even real. It's one thing to meet a favorite artist, or to be lucky enough to be seated across from a hero at a show or something like that. But then when you get to meet that person or encounter them, and you discover that not only are they every bit the legend you thought they were when you were a fan with their posters on your wall, but they're also just real people too. Real people with real pain and real worries and
real stories.
Too. And it's when you bring your heroes down to that human level and you can still connect with them on that level, it's an unbelievable thing. So to answer the question, I would say there's two things that stand out as being special.
Okay, go ahead.
One of them is
I was in Montreal as a guest. I had done the posters for their show that year. Like I did all the branding, the badges and the branding for their event. That was kind of how I broke into comics a little bit, was by going to conventions and basically just offering my services as a graphic designer and artist for their branding and their promotional stuff.
Wow.
And that ended up being kind of a cool gig to have, because they would pay me by giving me the hotel room and the table for the weekend, right? But
very cool.
I was also a guest at the show.
Right.
So when I found myself as a guest of the show, one of these shows had Simon Bisley as a guest. And Simon Bisley, of course, I'm a gigantic fan of. He drew Lobo in the 90s.
Absolutely. Heavy metal.
And Slain and heavy metal and, his own stuff. And the guy is just a god to me. And there I am sitting 2 tables down from him. And I'm wearing the same shirt I'm wearing right now. I'm wearing my Motorhead shirt.
Okay.
And and I'm sitting there and I look over and there's Biz sitting there at his desk just sketching.
Wow.
And I look at my wife and I said, "Oh my God, that's Simon Bisley." And she's like, "You got to go over and say hello to him." And I was like, "No, I can't." I said, "No, I can't talk to Bisley. I'm a nobody. No one knows who I am. I'm not going to go talk to Simon Bisley." And she was like, "No, you have to go talk to him. You'd regret it if you don't go and talk to him."
True.
So I was like, all right. So I steeled myself. I straightened myself up. I sucked my gut in, and I marched over to his table. And before I even got to his table, he looked up at me and he saw that I was wearing a Motorhead shirt, but he also saw that I was wearing a silver Mjolnir talisman around my neck.
Okay.
And he looked up and he just said, "Hey, that's a Mjolnir." And he reached up and he grabbed me and he pulled me down by the Mjolnir. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's a nice one, man." He goes, "Where are you staying, at the West End?" I said, "Yeah, I'm staying at the West End." He goes, "All right, well, we're going to drink tonight."
Wow.
And that was it.
That's crazy. Wow.
We just drank all night and had this amazing time. And he looked at my artwork. I'm sitting in this hotel room and Simon Bisley is flipping through my portfolio, asking me questions about my art.
That's crazy. That is surreal. Wow.
Art, man. I'll never forget that. As long as it's just a fantastic thing. And I can't wait to see Simon again. I'm going to probably see him in a couple of weeks, or next month actually, if at the Granite State Comic-Con in New Hampshire.
Very cool.
And it's been a long time since I've seen him. I don't know if he'll remember me, but my God, I'll never forget that day. That was fantastic. In terms of a career moment, though.
Okay. Yeah.
A different way, I have a really strong memory. It was my first year as a guest artist at the Toronto Comic-Con, at the
Fan Expo?
Fan Expo. And I was there at my table. And at that point, I hadn't been published very much. I'd had a couple of covers at Captain Canuck, and I had done a couple of things like smaller retailer incentive covers and things like that, but still didn't have any of the Aftershock stuff or any of the stuff I've done now.
Right.
And this dude walks up to my table, didn't know him from Adam. He had a bald head and he was nicely dressed and he had his name tag, like his badge was turned around so I couldn't see his name.
Okay.
He was standing at my table and we were just shooting the breeze and he was still looking through my portfolio. And in my portfolio, I have lots of Conan artwork because I'm a huge Conan fan. And so I had a couple of Conan the Barbarian pieces. And he was like, "Wow, these are nice Conans." And we started talking about Conan. And, I'm just like, who's this guy? Like, he's an hour. We're talking about Conan and stuff. After we're finished talking, he just kind of stopped and he straightened himself out and he said, "Mike, I've got to ask you." He goes, "What do you want to do, man?" He goes, "What do you want to do? Why are you here and what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" Like,
exactly.
"What do you want to do in comics? What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I got this tiny little dream." I said, I've always wanted to get a pinup in a Conan magazine. I've always wanted to get one of my drawings in a Conan magazine.
Wow.
That's all I wanted. A Conan comic. Show up as a pinup artist. That's all. That would mean the world to me.
Right.
He looked at me and started laughing and he said, "Well, Mike," he goes, "I think I can probably help you with that." And I said, "Oh yeah, who are you?" And he looked down, he saw that his badge was turned around. He flipped his badge around and he says, "Oh, I'm Patrick Thorpe. I'm the editor of Conan at Dark Horse."
Wow.
Just like that, I had this fantastic moment, and true to his word, he said, "Yeah, let me get home from Toronto." He goes, "It was the first time and the last time that we've had a publisher come to Toronto. I think in ages we had Dark Horse there. It was the last time Dark Horse has been in Toronto, but I don't think there's been another publisher up there who set up a booth since." to be honest with you, of any of the major ones anyway. But
Right.
anyway, that aside, true to his word, he called me when he got home and hooked me up with a pinup, and I got my a Conan pinup in a Savage Sword of Conan, and it blew my mind. And in that moment, I thought to myself, all right, Mr. Rooth, you've just achieved a dream that you've had since you were a little kid, and you still got a long way to go, so you better start thinking of some bigger dreams. And that's really what it was. That's really so that was a pivotal moment for me, because it was a thing that I never thought could ever happen.
Wow.
And it happened like that randomly, and I had no idea it was happening until it was over.
Exactly. You were on the ride without even knowing you were on board. That's
absolutely.
crazy.
It was just like hit this wavelength with this guy that ended up being a pretty major he gave me my first opportunity in comics, really. So it's kind of an awesome thing.
Wow, that is crazy. Serendipity. That is crazy. Yeah, that definitely is. I would say quite the highlight. I mean, yeah, there's so much more to come for sure. But yeah, those two stories, like, I wasn't even there, and I have a little bit of a goosebump. So,
Well, when you get to meet creators that you love and they turn out to be awesome people, there's no better thing in the world. I mean, I remember my first Comic-Con, I got to meet Sergio Aragonés, and he came to my table to get a photo with me. Like, my wife brought him over, and it was just like amazing. Like, I love Sergio Aragonés. It's like, Sergio Aragonés is at my table right now. Like, what's even happening right now? And yeah, I've had some really cool stuff happen, and I've developed small little weird friendships with celebrities out of these experiences too. Like Billy Boyd and I, whenever we see each other, it's always just laughter and a good
Very
time,
cool.
and it's just a funny random thing. Like only at Comic-Cons that these things, sort of the genesis of them begin, and then over the years you run into these people and you realize the stories just get better and better as you go.
Wow.
It's kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah, there is a certain magic to these conventions, regardless if you're a fan, artist, even in like volunteer, everyone has a great story.
Oh yeah.
Coming out of these shows, there's always something great that comes out of it, which is very, 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 very cool. And I mean, you've given us lots of words of wisdom, and even through your experience, and just this story alone, if you don't ask, you won't get it, right? But for any aspiring artists or anybody who's in the biz looking for a break, or even just starting to doodle and getting their art out there, what are Mike Rooth's words of wisdom?
All right. Well, they're not always well received, because they're real. But the words of wisdom that I have, if you're a young artist, is there's no fast way to get there. There's no shortcut.
Right.
There's tracing, and there's iPads, and there's light boxes, and there's all kinds of modern tools to get you to a certain place, but there is no substitute to practice. And the only way to get truly, really good at drawing is to draw. And the only way to really make comics is to make comics. And I know that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but people ask me all the time, Mike, how do I break into comics? And the only thing I can say is make comics. They don't have to be big. They don't have to be the next Watchmen. They don't have to be the next, whatever. Like they don't have to be the next Avengers or the next Spider-Man. But make your comic. Do your thing. And to artists, like we all have things that we're strong at drawing, and we have things that we're weak at drawing. Right. And I will always recommend, and it's advice I need to take myself, but draw the stuff that you hate drawing as often as you can, and get to a place where you don't hate it anymore. Because no matter what, when you're working in comics, you are going to get asked to draw any possible thing that you can imagine. Because that's the wonderful budget-free reality of comics that makes it superior to film in so many ways. You're not limited by special effects budgets. You're limited by the artist's imagination and the artist's reach on the page. And so just be prepared to draw anything by practicing drawing everything. And if you don't like drawing horses, then get drawing horses. If you don't like drawing cars, draw some cars. I know it sucks, but there's only one way to get there. If you're a storyteller, if you see yourself as kind of like a split between an artist and a writer, you're not really sure where you sit. Well, all I can say to that is, if you're a writer, try to tell short stories first. Don't worry about telling your gigantic 700
epilogue,
because that story's in there, but that story may not want to come out in the way you want it to until you get a bunch of little pieces out there first.
Right.
Create a body of work, make some short 5-page stories. The nice thing about that is if you're a writer and you want to break into comics, the best way to do that is to find an artist. Finding an artist to work for a low budget on a 30-page comic can be tricky. But if you can find someone to work on a 5-page story, and then maybe you can find someone else to work on another 5-page story, and maybe you as an author now can go to a Comic-Con and release a book with your artist friends and even collaborators and create some kind of anthology with a bunch of your short stories that were told in comic form. I guess what I'm saying is try not to worry about cutting the biggest piece of the pie. Right. Just take a nibble of the crust at first and see if you even like the pie, and get in there and just kind of tell some small stories before, and that big story will come roaring out of you one day. Same as with your art, if you have these big things you want to draw, that's cool, but figure out the little things too. Figure out the simple stuff. Like there's nothing as joyous as drawing a big action scene with Spider-Man and the Hulk punching bad guys through a wall. But trying to draw someone sitting on a park bench talking on a cell phone and make it look believable is a really challenging thing.
Wow.
Trying to draw someone mixing a salad in a kitchen while they're having a conversation about what the Joker's doing that night. Like these are the regular mundane things in life that occur in comic books that are what make comic books so real and so believable. It's those human moments. If you can capture a sense of reality in those human moments in your own drawings, then you're halfway there. And the big splash pages and things like that become secondary to the success that you'll have doing a proper setting or doing a proper, mundane scene that is a part of the connective tissue between the action of your story.
Wow, very cool. And yeah, I mean, these are definitely words to live by. And yeah, some won't, like those words for sure, like you've mentioned. But yeah, I mean, I guess that is the reality. Not everything goes viral. Not everything, will set ablaze as you go. But yeah, just getting at least rubbing those twigs together, you're bound to make some smoke. It's very cool.
One thing I can say too that I think is important. I think a lot of young creators lose sight of this. Everyone wants to tell a comic book and then have it become a Netflix special right away. They think you're going to get that giant Hollywood paycheck before their comic even hits the ground. And for some people that's true. Yeah. Even Kick-Ass the movie came out before the first series was over. Like it was already filmed in the theaters before that first story arc even ended.
True.
You know what I mean? So this can happen, but don't write comics with that intention. If you're getting into comics because you want to make money, you're getting into comics for the wrong reason. I'm not saying you're not going to make money, but if that is your primary drive behind doing it, buddy, there's other ways to make real, actual money. Make something because you want to make something. Tell a story because you got a story inside of you. And, make comics because you want to make comics, not because you want to make a storyboard for a film. If your comic becomes a storyboard for a film, well, that's a whole other conversation with much bigger numbers attached to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
but for your interests and for your needs, get that story told on paper first and let it grow into something, become something else if it's going to. Because if it's going to, that's not in your control. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And as we usually close off, we usually embarrass our artists with one last request, which is, can you leave us with one last pun?
Well, I think I can. I'll be honest with you. When it comes to puns, I'm one of those people that usually falls ass backwards into like launching 15 or 20 puns in a conversation without even realizing it. It's one of those things, where you'll just be talking about something and you're using language that's describing it. But I don't know if I have a good one loaded up, but I will say that I really enjoyed this interview, and I really feel like you got to the root of who I am, and during the discussions around Swamp Thing and the process of making some found object Swamp Thing art with this piece of Swamp Thing. So
exactly, it's Swamp Thing upon Swamp Thing. It's Swampception. That is amazing. Kudos on you. We've always try to catch our artists off guard. I think you may be one of the few that, really, you got me back this time really well.
I saw a clip of your show where you the artist at the end completely froze and didn't know what to do, and it was actually amazing to watch. I was like, I'm like, Ryan's not going to get me though. I'm going to have something cheesy.
Well, I mean, hey, you definitely, trimmed my, I guess hedges on this one, because you definitely got it. This well done, and I mean, what a great piece. That is amazing. to think that you're, conversating and just going at it, and look how much depth and personality it has. Wow, that is an amazing piece.
Well, listen, when the interview's over, hit me with your address. I'll mail this to you as a gift because I have today, so I'd be happy to send this to you. Yeah.
Oh wow! Thank you so much.
My pleasure,
thank you so much. That is crazy. Wow. Well, that's definitely going up here. That is great. Oh man, it's just so cool. Like, thank you so much. And for everything else that you'll be putting your heart into, and dipping anything into ink, we definitely wish you much success going forward. And again, we hope to have you back on the show, maybe not for a big interview like this one, maybe more for project oriented stuff. It's like, for example, your next Dodge Kickstarter.
I'm not sure when that will be happening. We're just filming the 3rd issue now, but we'll have this drawn. We're ready to launch the 4th one for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. And for you guys, if you guys enjoyed this episode, we highly suggest you hit that thumbs up, and obviously subscribe if you haven't already. If you enjoy watching, your favorite artist, maybe newcomer artist, watching the art process, what goes into their minds, coming up with this crazy, beautiful art. And I hope you guys take it easy and stay safe. Peace.